Today's lesson is on how to solve multi-step equations. Okay, so there are 3 steps to solving a multi-step equation. The first one is to distribute. So everything that we're doing in this lesson is a collection of some of the skills that you've already been practicing. So we're going to distribute, I should say distribute, not distributive, distribute. And I'm going to put if necessary or if needed, because not all problems will have the distributive property. Like this one doesn't have the distributive property, but this one does. So distribute, so the step number 1 is distribute if needed. Second one is combine like terms. And again, this is some of the top, actually all of these are from your first chapter. And 3, solve. Okay, so these are the 3 steps that we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to go through these steps each time through each one of the 4 problems. All right, number 1, distribute if needed. Again, I talked about there's no distribution, there's no parentheses. Nothing to distribute. So step 1, I can skip. Step 2, combine like terms. So I'm going to put things that are alike together. Remember, we did this in chapter 1. Okay, so those two will be put together. So we have a 9x and a negative 7x. That's 2x. And then we have a plus 1 and a negative 5, which is a minus 4, equals negative 20. So I've combined like terms. So everything's nice and neat and pretty as much as I can. And then the step 3 says solve. So I'm going to solve. Add 4 to both sides. And this is a 2-stepper. Okay, remember these are gone. Okay, and then because I have multiplication, I use division to get rid of it. And x is equal to negative 8. And that's my solution. Okay. Problem 2. Okay, step 1 says to distribute. So I have distributive property. Remember, I have to distribute the negative 7 to both pieces inside the parenthesis. So negative 7 times 3a is negative 21a. A negative 7 and what looks like a negative 1 is a positive 7 equals 91. Again, remember that a negative, when you distribute it, changes the sign of whatever's inside. So see how this was a positive, now it's a negative. See, this looks like a negative, so now it's a positive. Okay, so it changes the sign of everything. And then I'm going, again, everything is all, I don't have any combining like terms to do, so I'm done here. So now I'm going to solve. Okay, so negative 21a equals, was that 84? Divide by negative 21. A is equal to negative 4. And I'm done. All right, next one. So it looks like in this particular problem, problem number 3 and problem number 4, we're going to do all 3 steps. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I've got to distribute. Now with this one, you kind of have to treat, when you're doing this distributive property, you have to kind of treat it like this 4m isn't here. So that minus sign is kind of treated as a negative. So that subtraction sign kind of looks like a negative number now. That's how we're going to treat it. So it's going to be negative 5 times both of these things. All right, so I'm going to bring down the 4m because I'm not doing anything with it yet. And I'm going to distribute it. So this is going to give me negative 15m. A negative 5 and a positive 10 is a negative 50 equals 126. Okay, now I've done all my distributing. The next step is to combine like terms. So we're going to put the 4m and the negative 15m together. So positive 4m and negative 15 is negative 11m. Bring down the minus 50 because there's nothing to combine with it. Remember that m's can only be combined with other m's, not with anything what's called constant terms. We can't do anything with that, so we just bring them down. And then again, we have a 2-stepper, and which means it takes 2 steps to solve. So negative 11m equals 176. Divide by 11. Divide by 11. Sorry, negative. that's going to give you negative 16. Okay. All right. So last problem here we have is double distributive properties. So we got 2 times that we're going to have to distribute. So we're going to distribute the negative 3, and then we're going to treat this as a negative 1 and distribute that. All right, so negative 3 times k is negative 3k. Negative 3 and a negative 8 is a plus 24. We got a negative 1 times k, which is negative. Again, you could put negative k or negative 1k, either one. A negative 1 and a positive 5 is now negative 5. That equals 23. So I got to, this is the most you're usually going to get in a problem in Algebra 1 is having 2 distributive. They usually don't go much crazier than that. All right, so now I have to combine like terms. And again, this is back to when you were practicing this in when you're doing combining like terms in the last chapter. Put a negative 3k together with a negative, again, this is 1k. So together, that's negative 4k. I've got a positive 24 and a negative 5, which makes this plus 19 equals 23. Now, again, I have a 2-stepper. So you'll know that you have things in pretty good order when you're down to 2 steps. Usually with the linear equations, you usually are left with 2. Sometimes 1, but most of the time you're left with 2. One linear term, one variable term, it's called, with the one with the variable, and then one constant term that doesn't have a variable on it. Right? And we divide by negative 4. 4 divided by negative 4 is negative 1. And I'm done. Okay, so I'm going to jump down to the last problem since these other 3 are pretty much more of the same of what I did on the front of the worksheet or the notes page. So it's kind of a little bit overkill, and you're going to be practicing for the class in the classwork anyway. So I'm just going to do this last one where it has a fraction. It kind of messes with your minds a little bit, but we're gonna do this one. All right, so we're gonna do number 8. So all you have to think about is what is half of 10. So if you had $10 and you took half of it, you're going to be left with 5. All right, and then minus, because again, the signs aren't going to change because there's no negative out here. So this, you bring down the same sign, and half of 2. So I had 2 things, and I take half of them, I'm only left with 1. And then I got the 3x. That's on the outside. So remember, when we don't have anything that's attached to this distributive property, it just kind of comes down. Okay, so since the plus 3x is not attached to this in any way, then we just bring it down. If there's the parenthesis, this parenthesis here had been over here by the equal sign, then the half would apply to that, which would make the problem much harder. But right now, the half and then whatever. Basically, think of this as when you see a number that's outside here, this is your start and this is your stop. Your parentheses tell you when to stop multiplying by a half, or whatever the number on the outside is. All right, equals negative 25. Clean this up. We got 3x, 5x, and 3x. That's 8x. Bring down the minus 1 because I can't combine it with anything else. Okay, now I solve. I see subtract, so I add. Now, again, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, just to make sure that you're paying attention to what's going on in terms of your equation solving. All right, I got multiplication, so I divide. Now, in most of these, if you notice that division is always the last step, and there's always adding and subtracting. So remember, we're doing PEMDAS in reverse. So we're doing any add or subtracting first, and then multiplying or dividing second. But what I want you to notice is I want you to be able to see things like this. You should always see, when you're solving, you should always see the opposites. So if you see a minus 1, this better a plus 1. If this was a minus 5, you better see a plus 5. If this was a plus 10, you better see a minus 10, and so on. So you should always notice when you do these that when you're trying to get whittled down to the variable, that you should always see opposite things. when you're doing multiplication, you should always see division. So I see a multiply, this is a divide. Multiply, anytime you put a number next to a letter, it's a multiplication. So when I see multiply, I better see divide. Okay. The other side, you notice, is doing all the actual calculations. So one side is just whittling down to the letter. The other side's doing all the math, if you want to think of it that way, all the arithmetic, which is what they call it. And that's it. So that's all for this lesson. So just start that classwork and get her done, and see you soon.